Jasbinder Bilan, and I'm going to read for you from my second book, Tamarind and the Star of Ishta. And the first reading I'm going to do is from the very start, so chapter 1. Here we go. There's a small photo I keep on my bedside table. It's old and crinkly, with a neat fold along the left-hand corner. In the photo, Mum's about my age, but I can't really tell if I look like her because the photograph's taken from a long way off. She's on a homemade swing and it's fixed to a huge tree in full blossom. Her legs are waving in the air, and behind her, I can just make out a house with a veranda all around it. I love this photo because Mum's full of life, but it makes me cry that I never got to know her or hold her hand or snuggle into her shoulder. It's the only thing of Mum's that Dad would let me have, the last gift she ever gave him, and I'm keeping it safe for both of us. I don't know what happened to Mum. Dad won't tell me much. All he'll say is she was poorly and died when I was a baby. But now, for the first time, I'm going to find out. The thing is, I'm not sure I want to. I slip Mum's photo from the back of my passport and hold it in my palm, shuffle away from Chloe and turn to face the aeroplane window. I don't want her quizzing me again, asking me more questions about how I'm feeling, being all motherly. I flick her a quick look, but she doesn't see. She carries on reading, absorbed in the book. Long blonde hair hiding her freckled face. Do we look like a family when we're out together? Me and Dad with our golden skin. Chloe, who goes raspberry red at the sight of the sun. Dad leans across, taps me on the shoulder. Mint? He asks, shoving a bag of sweets under my nose. We'll be landing in Rinagar soon, and remember about ears popping? My stomach turns a double somersault when I think about staying with Mum's family all by myself. I hold Dad's gaze, plead with his warm brown eyes that everyone tells me are just like mine, and hope he's going to change his mind about leaving me there alone. He pulls a funny face and his dimples appear. Chloe puts her book down and digs into the mints. These are yum. Have one, Tam. They haven't got any gelatin in. I double-checked. She smiles at Dad and glances down at the photo. I move further towards the window and slide the photo away, putting everything back in my green Scandi rucksack. Dad always gets the ones without gelatin. I take a mint and put it in my mouth. Chloe ties back her hair and fiddles with her wedding ring. I've been learning a few new veggie recipes too. I think it's great to eat less meat. I keep looking out of the window. When she was just Dad's girlfriend, we were okay. But ever since they married and she moved in, it's been so different. I know she's my new mum now, but what does that even mean? And lately, I just can't seem to be nice to her.
Thank you. In both Asha and Tamarind, you've chosen heroines who are at that tween age, just preteen. What is it about that age group? Why did you choose it, or did it choose you?
I think it's quite an interesting age in the sense of it's the first time that you start to feel different and that you notice things about yourself, and it's a time of change. So you're moving from childhood into your first steps to being an adult. And so I think it's an interesting age to write stories about, because your character has quite a lot of dynamism and quite a lot of things that maybe they're not happy about. So I think it's a great age because you can throw quite a lot in there and capture your reader's attention straight away.
Yeah, they're just on the cusp. And with both of these girls, they're so full of energy and um, get up and go, and I can do stuff. And I loved that in both stories, the possibilities for girls that I think they're often very unfairly treated, and that people dismiss them. I loved the spirit in both of the books. You said on your website you loved writing yourself when you were a girl. Have you kept any of the stories? Because you said your family were really supportive. I was wondering if your mum had held on to them, or what
Well,
did you think about?
yes, I was really, I loved stories. And even from the time before I could write, when you're preschool and you're fascinated. I remember being completely fascinated by my brother's books. He would bring his school books home before I started school and show me his writing. And that whole kind of, I had a fascination with the lines on the paper, and I would kind of take a pencil and just sort of make all these squiggles. I remember really clearly, and I thought I was writing, but I was making kind of lots of kind of wiggles and patterns. And so then when eventually I could write, I wrote stories all the time, and they were more than anything, they were to entertain myself. And there were two things that I loved to do. I loved to write stories. I had a really vivid imagination. So I used to kind of write all these things down. And I used to love drawing. So I would illustrate them as well. And you've got to remember, I kind of grew up in this very boisterous family. I had 6 siblings, and I don't think I think my mum gave me attention, but I think it was all very kind of rough and tumble. So the person that kept my stories was a lovely family friend, an old lady that lived at the end of our road, and she was called Auntie May. She sort of befriended our family. And so that's where I used to take my stories. I remember writing them and then kind of taking them down to her, and she would collect them for me, kind of make them into books. And she was so sweet. She was such a lovely person. And she was a great baker, and she used to make cakes. And so I would take her my stories, and in exchange, she would give me a big cake and a glass of milk. So yeah, that was the story of the stories.
Oh, amazing. Yeah, I was one of 7 as well. Yeah,
So you know
you,
exactly what
yeah,
it's like. You take
yeah,
what you can.
exactly. Yeah, you look after one another rather than
Yeah.
expecting lots of attention from your mother. But you say you never imagined you'd write a story that would be published. You trained first as a teacher, so you must have done the MA in creative writing as a mature student. What what made you decide to take that? Was it always kind of back in your mind that you might write?
Yes, I think when I do my school visits, particularly, I talk to the children about what are they passionate about at that moment, and to write a letter to themselves that they can open when they're older and remember. And for me, it was always stories, and writing was always such a huge thing. It was a very natural thing for me. But I don't think I made that connection between stories that are written and books that you might borrow from the library. So I was a huge reader and went to the library a lot. But when I went there, I didn't understand how all of these stories got into the books. So I never particularly kind of thought that you could have a job as an author, that that somebody had to sit down and write this story, and then somebody else decided that it could be good enough for a book. And so I wrote all the time into adulthood. I wrote them when I had my boys. I wrote stories for them, kind of Christmas stories that we would read around Christmas time. Um, but I still kind of didn't. I had this passion and I wanted to write, but I was busy being a teacher, and I suppose I was in the world of story. But I did remember that dream that I had when I was a girl. And I thought, I had a big birthday, and I thought, look, if you are serious about wanting this dream that you had when you were 8, 9, 10, 11, you have to do something practical about it. And so I was really lucky to live in Bath, and the MA Creative Writing at Bath Spa has a really, really great reputation. And I ended up applying twice. So I applied once and it wasn't the right time for my family. I was still teaching, and then I applied a second time. And at this point, we kind of made a decision as a family that I could stop teaching for a year and I would give it a go. I would write my story. And that's really, it was so kind of fundamental in the transition between just being somebody. No, I don't mean just being somebody. Writing is amazing, and I think it's a great thing in itself to be creative and to write stories. But it was the moment. It was a game changer for me, in the sense of I now knew that I had a kind of a path to follow. I knew that I was going to get support. The fantastic tutors. They had really good success rate in getting their students published, or to be published authors. So that was the huge thing that made all the difference to me. And so I spent a year, I did it full time, and I was still kind of teaching as well at the same time, doing supply. And that's where I wrote Asha and the Spirit Bird. And it was a wonderful way to write it, because the course taught me discipline. It taught me that it's 99% perspiration and probably more than 1% inspiration, but it's hard work. Asha in the first draft was about 55,000 words, and if you at the beginning you think, well, I'm going to write this story of 55,000 words, how am I actually physically going to get there? It takes an awful lot of energy, and you have to remember that it's one word at a time will get you there, and it's sitting down and just doing the graft. So yeah, it was amazing. So I wrote Asha and the Spirit Bird on the course, and part of the course, it's such a wonderful course, and it's also kind of it looks at the creative side of it, but it also gives you a really great insight into the whole publishing world, because that's a whole other story. And so we had a book launch. All of the authors from that year have a proper book, and it's the first time you see an extract of your story as it might be, and it's so exciting. And you kind of enter that world of agents, publishers, and it's a bit like speed dating. We had it at Foyle, so it was all done really wonderfully. It was a party, really, a launch party, and I had my book and I had my little elevator pitch, and we were kind of going around meeting agents, and it was just really wonderful. And then after that I had quite a bit of interest, but nothing firm, and because I wrote the first draft quite quickly, and so I edited myself for a year, and then I entered the Times Chicken House competition in 2017, and I won. So that in itself, that sort of action of entering the competition, I was completely amazed that I won it, because there were about 1,000 entries, and it's also international, so you can enter it from all over the globe. And my editor, who's my editor now, Kezia Lupo, she was the one that picked my story out, and I'm so hugely grateful to her, and to Chicken House, and to Barry Cunningham, because they're such a wonderful publisher. They're all about the story. So that was really exciting. So that
loads of positive reviews straight away. That it makes a big difference, doesn't it, getting your name out there for bookshops and
absolutely
buyers, and and getting the readers. You moved to Nottingham when you were a baby, 1.5, but India is so alive in your stories. I'm interested in this kind of an alternative you that's growing up over there. I mean, do you think you'll go on returning to India, or is this an imaginative way of having another life over there, if you like.
Yeah, it was strange really, because I think that when I was thinking of the story that I was going to write on the MA, when I kind of first went in, I had a very clear idea of the story that I wanted to write, and it was inspired by the close relationship that I had with my Manji, my grandma, and about all the sort of stories that she told us about India. Because of course, when I was born there, but I don't really have my own memories of it. And there's kind of body memory. So obviously I kind of feel I was physically there. So I must have kind of those body memories. And then all the other memories are from the stories that my grandma told me. And they were really, really vivid stories. And I think that there was this whole kind of sense of place, of having two homes. And I think it really inspired my imagination. So when the family would talk about the farm in India, they were like really fun times, and kind of full of laughter. And we would, my uncles, we would all gather, and my mum would make food. And the stories that came out over and over again were stories about, we had a wild monkey called Omar who adopted our family, and she was really part of the family. And she would take my brother off when he was a baby and run off into the neem tree and kind of climb really high so nobody could get her. And so this was such a sort of happy, lovely story. So that would kind of come out all the time. And so it kind of fired my imagination. So when I came to think of a story that I would write, I knew that I wanted to write a story, a magical story. I knew that I wanted it to be magical because it was going to be a children's story, although it's inspired by the close relationship with my grandmother. So Asha has a very close relationship with her Naniji, and this kind of idea, this strong idea that that our ancestors stay with us. That was something that my grandma talked a lot about when I was little, and I thought it was just a really comforting, lovely thing. And when I was writing the story, I felt my grandma's spirit kind of with me, uh, encouraging me, which was something that she always did. She was wonderful, wonderful person. And so I kind of use these things, particularly in Asha's story. And when I started to write the story in those kind of first moments where you're being really creative and open, I had a very strong image of a little girl playing in the dust with water, with a big brass container, and pouring the water in like children everywhere do. So there's that real universality. But it was, and then I began to ask myself kind of what if questions. So this image, what could have been my grandmother when she was a girl, because she used to talk to me a lot about what it was like when she was little as well. Maybe it was me if my family hadn't moved to the UK. And so it's part fact and a big part fiction. And I've started to blend the two together. And you know, so I had those ingredients. I knew I wanted it to be a magical story, and of course, with it being a story for children, it had to be kapow. I had to give it a kapow opening. So you think, you know, what could happen in this story, and so that was how it all started.
It comes across very strongly in how you're speaking now, but also on your website and in interviews, that you come from such a strong storytelling tradition. I was very interested when I was reading Asha and the Spirit Bird, that it's almost like there's a melding of different kinds of traditions. Like there's a touch of when they go to see the fortune teller, it's almost like she could be the witch in Hansel and Gretel. And there's a touch of Babes in the Wood and the giant mango plant, which is a bit like Jack and the Beanstalk. It's almost like you're melding lots of storytelling traditions. I thought it worked really well. And they're so exciting. I mean, I did like that when I was thinking, I don't know how you classify these books because they've got a touch of realism. There's adventure in there. There's magic in there, and you know, family is a really strong theme. But there's also a lot of loss. And I know there are people are anxious about children reading about, difficult things. How do you feel about that? Because there is quite a lot of absence, loss, difficult themes in your books.
Yeah, I think it's really important to take children to dark places in
Mm,
books. And I think it kind of offers them a safe space to explore that experience. It shows them, it gives them a window into somebody else's life. It develops their empathy. So although it's hard, I think that children are resilient and it develops their resilience. And I think also it shows us that these experiences exist. There are children who have a really hard time, and I think it's really important to let them know that we see them as well.
mm, yeah. Jacqueline Wilson talks a lot about that, how she got a lot of flack for putting difficult topics. And she said, not everybody lives in an ideal world, in an ideal family. And, I think, there is a place for escapism, but certainly for dealing with the dark things. And I do think if it's a story, like you say, it's a safe space. Um, you were, I could see, in demand in schools, festivals, libraries, and so on. Must have been very difficult since COVID that you've lost that kind of connection with your audience.
Yes, well, I think that, the wonderful thing is that through COVID and technology, I think things have moved really brilliantly. So, of course, it's not the same as going into a school and physically kind of meeting children and
Mm,
doing the festivals in that way. But I've managed to do a lot of virtual festivals, and I was involved in Bath Children's Literature Festival, Cheltenham. So all the main ones that I was already kind of down to do, I was able to do virtually. And I've also been doing virtual school visits. I've just finished doing some for Wells Literary Festival just now, last week. And so that was really, really lovely. And to be able to, it felt very intimate. I think sometimes the virtual events can have that extra kind of sense of intimacy. So I was being kind of what would you call it, being sort of channeled into the classroom, and the children could kind of come up quite close, and I could show them my shelf. I had lots of
yeah.
different things up there, kind of inspiration. So it's different but still good, I think, in that sense of kind of keeping the connection going with children and schools and festivals. And also because a lot of them have been recorded, so there's access globally. Everybody can log in and watch these things, and watch them again and again. And I think it's also been a great resource for teachers to be able to have that moment where they can bring me into their classroom, or they can bring Cresta Cowell into the classroom,
Mhm.
or Catherine Rundle. There's an accessibility of all these things that are available. There's a lot of things, a lot of lovely creative content.
Mm. And you teach creative writing as well. You said you used to be a teacher. I'm sure you've got lots of skills that you can bring to that. So you said you sometimes get them to write a letter. That's a wonderful idea. Do you find children are receptive to creative writing at the ages you're working with them?
Absolutely, they love it. I think children are naturally creative.
Yeah.
So if you give them something that sparks their attention or sparks their creativity, I think they're really, really happy to get involved. And I think even when because obviously all children don't find writing, the physical thing of writing, easy, but I think if you give them a way in, they're everybody enjoys doing it because everybody loves stories. Everybody
Yeah.
loves stories, actually. As human beings, we have this template and it's really grounded in us. So, it might be the kind of the joke, which is also a story.
Yeah.
It might be all, somebody tells you about what happened to them that morning,
Mhm.
or they might read you a story. And I think there's something really magical that happens when someone's telling a story and when you're listening to a story. And I can feel myself doing it. Like I said, with a lot of the virtual events, I've heard a lot of authors reading from their work, and it's so wonderful. And you kind of feel yourself slipping into this kind of, I don't know, this space.
Mhm.
And I think there's something kind of happens in your brain as well. You
Mm.
relax and you just go to a different place. And I think it's wonderful.
Yeah. Well, your book certainly brought me to a different place. I love them. You said you're a member of Authors for Oceans. I haven't heard about this until I read about it on your website. I didn't know about it. It campaigns to clean our waters of plastic. Could you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, so it was started by two authors, Lauren St. John, who is a wonderful, wonderful author. She writes lots of stories set in Zimbabwe and South Africa. Sorry, don't quote me. I think I'm one of the two. And M.G. Leonard. So these two wonderful authors started it, and now there are lots and lots of authors who are members of this kind of organization, if you like, and it's about raising awareness, children as well as being really creative. They're also passionate about the planet and passionate about saving wildlife and animals, and so last year I did the Hay Festival with Lawrence St. John and Nicola Davies and Yuval Sommer, and we were kind of on the stage together talking about Authors for Oceans. So very often during a festival, there'll be a slot where Authors for Oceans will have a wider kind of panel, and each of us will talk about how nature, how saving the planet appears maybe not in an overt way in our stories, but as a kind of a part of the themes of the stories, and maybe just kind of recount things that we remember when we were young, little stories about saving birds. I had a particular story where I remember when I was little, finding a dead sort of fledgling bird. It was kind of, I didn't know it was dead at the time, and just kind of, I brought it in. I took my mum's big spoon. This is a terrible story, really. I took my mum's big spoon from the kitchen and kind of scooped it up and brought it in. And I really, really wanted to save this bird. And it was kind of without feathers. It had just fallen out of the nest.
Yeah.
And so just to kind of share that sort of story with children and make them feel that they can do something and that we can all do something together.
There is a really strong sense of nature, whether it's plants or birds or animals or all of those, like, particularly, ones that are specific to India. I was wondering, did you get to India often before COVID, or you must still have relatives there, presumably?
Yes, I've got my mum's side of the family is there. My dad's side of the family kind of moved to the UK. And actually, I didn't go back very often when I was young. And the first time I did go back was when I was an adult, when my grandmother passed away. And it was a huge thing. And it was kind of homage to my grandma. And we went as a family. And that's when I saw the farm for the first time, this farm that had been talked about and talked about.
Yeah.
And it had a huge impact on me. I kept diaries when I was there, when I went, and I used those to kind of help me when I wrote the setting for my story for Asha, particularly for Asha. I kind of use those diaries because it's Asha is more of a story where you get a sense of India because you're traveling over the mountains. It's a journey, so she's going to the city, and I used all of the kind of very visceral kind of memories that I have of that trip to write in a really kind of rich way. I wanted to be able to kind of recreate it and to kind of make people feel that they were there with the sights and smells.
Yeah. But I got that in Tamarind as well. I mean, I thought you must have gone there at that age, because I was, I got so caught up in the story of, like, she's there and it's all new, and it's a great story. We're out of time. It's been great talking to you. Yeah, the time flies by really quickly. I mean, that was great. It was really good insight into your work. But thank you very much. Do you have an ending reading for us, please?
Yes, sure. So this reading is from about a third of the way through the book, through Tamarind and the Star of Ishta. And it's the moment when Tamarind has met Hanu, the monkey, and he's leading her through the forbidden garden, the wild garden, for the very first time. And at this moment, Tamarind has, she's not particularly happy because things have happened in the house. She's fallen out with her cousin Sophia. And so there's a lot going on. So just to give you a little bit of context as to where we are. So here we go. I feel a tugging on my sleeve, and when I look down, there's a tiny hand wrapped around my fingers. Hello again. I let out the tight breath at last. I thought I'd lost you. He seems tired and slowly pulls me along through the thinning mist, making high-pitched chattering noises. When I glance down, I see the arc of impossible gold dust as he flicks his tail through the night air. I let the monkey lead me further into the undergrowth, further into the unknown. Black, shadowy tree limbs appear on either side, spreading their branches low. The monkey and I walk hand in hand through the milky darkness, where a white owl crosses our path, shuddering its wings, making my heart rap harder. I'm glad you're here, I tell him, clutching his hand more tightly. But where are you taking me? Are we even in the garden anymore? He gives me a little monkey grin and squeezes my hand back. The sky above us brightens and a full moon spreads jagged shadows across the snow-capped mountains in the distance. There, in front of me, lit up by moonbeams, is a crumbling stone archway smothered in spiraling plants, the entrance to a neglected part of the garden. On top of the arch is a worn statue of a majestic-looking woman, standing tall with vast wings behind her. To either side sit two stone owls. Her feet are talons, and she rests them lightly on two lions who lie beneath her. One hand is raised as if she's beckoning me forward. Suddenly, the monkey chatters and disappears into the trees. Sweat beads across my forehead. Where am I? I need to turn back. This is stupid. I can't even see the house anymore. There are wolves out here, maybe other things too. An icy wind lifts the leaves gathered at the foot of the archway, swirls them until they lift off the ground and rise to the top, falling through the air like dark snow. An echoing giggle from behind makes me jump, and I hear the tune I heard when I first arrived. But the humming, lilting voice is closer this time, closer and closer.
Thank you very much.